React has been so in demand for a while now, and it's really made a spot for itself, or a name for itself. It's not going anywhere. So I'm really excited to go through a React tutorial with you today. As someone who's been a software developer now for over 4 years, it's something that I still get excited about, is taking different tutorials and learning new things. React was actually my first library or framework that I learned back, I guess, almost 5 years ago. And at the time I thought, this is impossible. How does anyone ever get the hang of this? I'm never going to understand this. But what you do is you keep on practicing, you keep on learning, and then all of a sudden it becomes like second nature. Now, I'm really excited to do this tutorial with you because I haven't touched React in 3.5 years. I used to use it on some side projects, but I've really been, for the last few years, I was working with Node and Express and building APIs and working with databases, so more back-end things. And then the current project I'm on, I'm doing more front-end things, but not with React. So I'm really excited and kind of nervous to dive back into it. For this, we are going to be following along with React's actual documentation. I mean, what better way to really dive into React than following along with their documentation? We are going to be building a tic-tac-toe game. So once you are done this tutorial, you'll be able to say to all of your friends that you built you coded your first tic-tac-toe game. Before we get into it though, let's talk about what exactly is React. Google knows it all, and Google says React is a free open source front-end JavaScript library for building user interfaces on UI components. So some of the great things that I really like about React is you can really have different components for different kind of UI features. So for example, these different UI features can be reused, and rather than having to constantly build out the code over and over again, you can just reuse the existing components, which is really great. Before we get into it though, make sure to hit that subscribe button for more coding and tech related videos. Leave down in the comments other tutorials you want us to take together. I thought this would be a really fun series to kind of be like coding buddies, continue to learn and holding each other accountable to learn new technologies. Even if we don't dive deep into the technologies, getting an understanding for different technologies out there I think is so important to stay well versed and up to date in the tech industry. Okay, enough of me talking, let's get coding. Okay, so on screen here now, we have the React docs pulled up to build this tic-tac-toe game. It's a very simple tutorial that we will be following along, and the whole purpose is though that they provided this on their documentation is because it gives you the skills that you need to really build any React app. And what I mean by that is there's only so much things that you can do with React for the basics anyways, and then from there you just build onto it. So if you are able to successfully complete this tic-tac-toe game, there is so much other things you can build with this. And it really is a great way to understand the fundamentals. So as you can see here on screen, we have the React tutorial. And if I scroll down a little bit, you can see that we will be building the tic-tac-toe game, and there are some prerequisites. There are two options when you are setting up this tutorial. One is that you can set it up directly in the browser or code in the browser, or you can set it up locally. For this tutorial, when we are following along, let's set it up locally. Let's have a little bit more of a challenge and really dive into React. So to start with, we really need to make sure that we have both Node installed and as well that we have Create React App installed. I'm not sure, I actually don't think I have Create React App on my personal computer right now, so let's go through the steps of setting that up. Okay, so as you can see, the first thing to setting up a Create React App is we need Create React, My App, My App. So just to make any first app. And for me, make sure you are doing this in whatever folder or place that you want this app to live. For me, as you can see, I literally just put it on my desktop. I'm kind of notorious for that. I always regret it later because I'm like, there's so much things on my desktop, but it's what I do. Okay, we can see here that it has successfully been installed. So next step, let's go right into the app. So cd my app, and then let's run npm start. And as you can see, I'm sure this came up for you as well, we now have localhost 3000 running. Let me show you right here. There we go, amazing. First step is complete. So now let's go back to the tutorial and see what they are saying to do next. They are saying on point number 3 to delete all files in the source folder of the new project. Okay, so let's go and open our VS Code, our project in VS Code, and do just that. Also, just so you know, I'm going to stop running on localhost right now because it's just kind of to test to make sure it works. Okay, so as it says here, delete all files inside of the source folder. There also is an important note to actually do not delete the entire source folder, just the original source files inside it. So make sure to keep the actual source folder. They give you a command to do that on terminal. I'm literally just gonna delete from VS Code. Okay, now we should have an empty source folder. Next step, they are saying to add a file named index.css inside the source folder, and they are providing the CSS code to go along with it. So they are saying to take this CSS code here from the tutorial and put it right in CSS file. And the reason they're providing this is so we can really focus on the React part of the tutorial, not necessarily building out the CSS structure of it. Next step they are saying is to add a file named index.js to the source folder with this JavaScript code. Okay, we got this, we can do this. And they want it with this JavaScript code, so I'm going to go Command A, Command C, this is on a Mac by the way, go back here and Command V. And then they're also saying we need to import React from React, import React DOM from React DOM, and then also import the CSS, all to this index.js file. So let's do just that. Make some room at the very top. And there we go. Okay, now it gets to the exciting part. They are saying we can simply run npm start, and then going back to localhost 3000 in the browser, we should see a tic-tac-toe empty field. So they really provided us the structure to start the tutorial without having to worry so much about code that isn't necessarily relevant to the actual React part of this tutorial, which I really like that they gave it to us, especially the CSS, because that's a whole other tutorial on its own. The React tutorial is not here to teach you about CSS, so it's really nice they did that. Let's run npm start. Make sure at this point also you are inside my app or whatever you named it. Okay, we can see here we have an empty tic-tac-toe game. Okay, this is great. Okay, now we got the basis of our project set up, so now we can kind of dive into React, the exciting part of why we are all here. So it says here that React has a few different kinds of components, but we'll start with React.component subclasses. Okay, so let's really look into what this starter code, what they provided for us. So as you can see, when we look on screen, we essentially have 3 React components. We have the square, we have the board, and then we also have the game. Now, usually at this point, I would say, especially when I'm using code that I didn't build from scratch, I always love to really, kind of reverse engineer what the code is on screen. So this is just a little tip. And what I like to do is comment out different parts of the code to see what parts of the code are doing what on screen. So this is if you are doing any kind of front-end project, it's a great way to really have an understanding of, okay, this component here, I see if I comment it out, it's going to break the UI for this. So that means it's doing this. And it's a great way to really get into understanding exactly what's going on behind the scenes. Now, for this part of the tutorial, I'm not going to do that just because there's not even enough here to break the code at this point, but we will later on just to play around with it. So what they're saying to do next in this tutorial is to pass some data through props. So let's try passing some data from our board component to our square component. So let's navigate together to our board component. And we can see here where it says render square. What they want us to do is pass a prop called value to the square. So change this from here to pass a prop, which would be value equals curly brackets and then the value. So right now it's just going to be I. So whatever is passed into render square, the value will equal. Next up, they want us to change the square's render method to show that value we are replacing. Okay, so let's go to square's render method. And in the to-do, that is where we are going to be passing in the value. This.props.value. Okay, now let's save that. And let's go back to our local host. And we should see we should see some numbers now, which is pretty exciting, as you can see. So prior there was no numbers, and now that we are actually passing in a value for the numbers, we get the numbers. So now we're passing the value, but we really need to make the component interactive. So let's go back to the square component, they are saying. And they want to, similar to tic-tac-toe, fill the square component with an X when we first click it. So X and O's. So first we need to change the button tag that is returned from the square's render component, or render function, sorry. So now when we are in our square component, let's do an on click. And at this point, they want us to console log out click just to really see that it is coming in. So console log click. Okay, so let's go back to localhost, our browser. And then we should see, if you go right click, inspect into our dev tools, go to our console. And then if we click on a number, you can see click. Okay, that's pretty exciting, especially if this is your first time using React or really any kind of dev tools. Okay, going back to the documentation, you can see the next step is they want the component to actually remember it got clicked. Right now we're logging it out to see that it's clicked, but now we need it to remember that. And for that, we use something called state. So as it says in the documents, this .state should be considered as private to a React component that it's defined in. So in this case, let's just jump right in and kind of go through it. I think that will be more clear than talking through it, but it does give some examples in the React tutorials. So it says, let's store the current value of the square in this .state and change it when the square is clicked. So let's go to our React component, and now let's add in the constructor. So now, as you can see, we set the initial state. The value right now is just null. So the initial state is null before anything is clicked or done to it. Then if we go down in the tutorial, we need to change the square's render method to display the current state value when it's actually clicked. So let's follow the instructions. It says to replace this.props.value with this.state.value inside the button tag. So here we go, because now we are using state. So that makes sense. And then the on-click event handler, obviously right now it's just logging it out into the dev tools, the click with exclamation marks. So we need that to actually set the state. Okay, so at this point, as it says, now that we are actually doing the on-click handler in the squares render method, what this is doing, now what we have done here is you can see that whenever this button is clicked with this.state.value, what it is essentially doing is whenever this square is clicked, to replace it with the X. Okay, so let's test it out and ensure it is working. I always, after I do pretty much any kind of coding, even if it's a small amount, I always like to test it out, because if you get too far into it without testing, I think it can cause a lot of problems, especially when you want to see, especially if you're doing front end or even back end too. I test quite a bit, all the time actually. But it is a great way to ensure that you didn't break anything, or if you did break something, you didn't change that much code that you're gonna have to spend another hour debugging, hopefully. Okay, so let's go to localhost, refresh. There we go. So now you can see here, wherever we click, we get the X's. And then when we refresh, it goes back to resetting the game. Okay, we're almost there. We have the X's coming up for tic-tac-toe. So the next step under completing the game. And as it says here, we now need to have an alternative placing for X's and O's on the board. So, and it also says to check for a winner, we'll need to maintain the value of each of the 9 squares in one location. So now what we need to do, as it says in the instructions, is the board component should tell each square what to display by passing in a prop, and just like we did when we passed in a number to each square. And also here they have highlighted in bold, which is really important, is to collect data from multiple children components. You need to have declared the shared state in the parent component instead. So that's really important to know. And the parent component can pass down the state back down to the children by using props. So when I was first learning React, I always thought of it like pretty much literally when parents are passing down knowledge to their children. Okay, so next up, let's add a constructor to the board and set the board's initial state to contain an array of 9 nulls corresponding to the 9 squares. Okay, let's go do just that. Okay, next up, we need to now use the prop passing mechanism again. So what they are saying to do is we need to modify the board component to instruct each individual square about its current value, whether it be X, O, or null. So now we need to go back into the board's render square method and kind of update it. So let's do just that. Okay, so now that we have updated the render square method to include the this.state.squares and whatever the value of the squares is, hence the I, next up we need to change what happens when an actual square is clicked. So as it says here in the instructions, we need to create a way for the square to update the board state. Since the state is considered to be private to a component that defines it, we cannot update the board state directly from the square. So that makes sense. So what they're saying to do instead is pass down a function from the board to the square. So back in the board component, I'm going to space this out a little bit here. Okay, so next up, we need to add some changes to the square component because we are passing down 2 props from the board to the square. So instead, we need to replace this.state.value with this.props.value in square's render method and replace this.setState with this.props.onClick in square's render method. So let's go do all those changes. And we can delete the constructor because the whole purpose of it initially was to keep track of the game state, but because we don't need it and it doesn't do that anymore, we can delete it. Oh, and also I actually was just about to move on, but I realized I didn't change this.state.value to this.props.value. Okay, so as I'm sure you saw, we did make a method called handleClick, or we're utilizing one, but we've yet to actually make it. So that's the next step. So let's do that within the board component itself. And we'll do that right above the render square method. It should be defined. Should it not be defined? What's going on here? Oh, I know why. I have slice here instead of squares. Okay, this is why I'm telling you, sometimes it just takes a long time for the most simplest things. Okay, please work. Yay! Okay, we got it. If that was you too, we figured this out together. Okay, let's move on. So next up, what are we doing? We have here, now this, as you can see, you can actually use this method and it will actually work. Now we are so close to completing this game. Let's just finish it. Okay, I feel like I keep on saying this, but we are almost there. So one thing we're gonna do is some code cleanup now. So with our square component, because we are not doing any state or anything with state in it, we can actually just make this a function component instead. So let's go back to our code base and we can replace the current square component with this. So let's do function square and then pass in props. Then from here we can actually remove the render and remove that extra bracket, and then now we don't need to use this dot props, we can just use props.value. Okay. Oh, and then also to make sure, if you haven't already, for onClick we can update that to simply be onClick and make it this dot, oh sorry, not this dot props, props.value. Props.onClick, because we're calling onClick. Okay, so now we need to ensure that the O's can be marked on the board, because currently if you were to test it out, the O's wouldn't be able to. So let's go back to the board component. There we go. And they are saying we can set this by default by modifying the initial state in our board. Okay, cool. So construction props, we're going to go into the state, which they're saying we need to modify, and also add X is next to be true, which is going to be a Boolean, so either true or false, based on determining which player goes next and the game state that will be saved. Okay. And then they say we're going to update the handle click. Okay, and just as a last thing, let's change the status text in the board so that player knows whose turn is next. And to do that, all you need to do is go in the board's component and under render here, instead of it just being a static next player is X'd, let's change that to next player is X or is O. So now let's go back and view the full code at this point and make sure everything is working. Next player is up. Uh-oh. We're not getting any O's in our project. So let's go back and do some debugging. Okay, I'm not sure if this happened to you or if you already figured it out, but for me, what I forgot to do was in the handle click method here, I could see that the squares are always equal to X. And one way I kind of backtracked with that is saying, okay, if X is just always appearing, where is X being declared? Where is it first coming in? And where's O supposed to be coming in? And then you go kind of backtrack, okay, on handle click, obviously on the click, the square will be shown either X or O. So that's why I knew to go right to the handle click method. And then when I'm there, I can see squares is simply just declaring X, which we need to ensure is X or O. So let's update that to this.state.x is next, and then it will be X. Otherwise, it will be O. Okay, let's go back and give this a try. X. Fingers crossed for O. Yay! XO. Okay, we just made our first React game, or your first React game, and it's pretty cool. Listen, it's a simple game, but what I challenge you to do is continue on with this tutorial, whether it be creating more UI out of it, creating maybe a backend for it, maybe creating, I don't know, there's so many possibilities, but taking this project to the next level. I always say one of the things that is easy to do when we are learning something new is getting stuck in what's called tutorial hell. So you take tutorial after tutorial after tutorial. When in reality, yes, tutorials are important, but equally as important are building your own things. And what I used to do is really build from this. So next steps, there are more steps that you could actually follow for this React tutorial. So I challenge you to do that, and then also to build something on your own, see what you can create. I hope you enjoyed going through this tutorial with me. As I said, I'm starting this series of doing different tutorials together because I just feel like sometimes you need a coding partner, coding buddy to really dive into different projects with. If you have any questions or got stuck anywhere along the way, I'm always here to help you, so leave them in the comments and I'll do my best to debug with you. Make sure to hit that subscribe button for more tech and coding related videos. Shout out to some of these subscribers here. Thank you for being amazing, and okay, I'll see you all soon.